I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this list might be just a smidge of a mess.
Well, you can take the girl out of hell.
But it will at the very least be fun, most probably. So here's our list of the most powerful DC characters that most people forget about. I hope you guys like it. I really don't want to face the wrath of the DC fanbase. So you're here and you're waiting to see who we have for this entry. Could it be Perpetuum maybe? Elaine Bellick? Or, okay, yeah, we're just trying to delay what's coming, but you already know who we're going to talk about. That's right, it's Raven. Now, out of everyone who we could have picked, why Raven? I'm sure a lot of you are sitting there going, I know Raven, Teen Titans. Yeah, okay, you're right. If you're a fan of the Teen Titans, you definitely know who Raven is. But Raven goes on this list in particular not only because of how most mainstream audiences tend to forget that she even exists, but we also tend to forget just how powerful she really is. So while as a character herself she might not be fully forgotten, the entire breadth of what she can do usually is. If we start off with all of her feats, we would be here all day, but to name a few to truly showcase her power, she has withstood Zauriel's sword, which even cut down the Spectre. She has the ability to traverse through the multiverse and even destroy entire universes by consuming them, which is kinda cool. Moreover, she literally absorbed the soul of Darkseid and rewrote it. She faced off against Belial as well, and came out victorious. We literally cannot stress just how powerful she really is. And oh, the tip of the iceberg here? She's basically immortal. She is definitely one of the most wackiest sorcerers. Demons? What do you even call her? And yet, a lot of times in stories, she's sort of relegated as a supporting character, which is a pretty major bummer if you ask me. So while she may not be completely forgotten in the traditional sense, what she's really capable of often is. And that's why she's on this list. Slade, Mr. Deathstroke himself. In recent years, we haven't seen Slade as much. He was on Arrow for a little bit and he was in a post-credit scene in Justice League, and that's pretty much it. And as such, our memory of him has become hazy as another really cool and overpowered DC character who kinda gets mixed in with all of the other cool DC baddies. But why? Slade is one of the more interesting and amazing DC villains. With a mercenary-like combat style, he's almost human, but with way too much experience in fighting, which almost always leads to him having an upper hand in every fight he's in. To top it all off, someone as strong as Slade has regenerative abilities. Not to the point where you can cut off one of his limbs and it'll grow back, probably, but this ability is good enough to keep him in the fight unscathed, no matter how many times you manage to nick him. If we talk about a fight between Nightwing and Slade, there really is no competition, as Slade is one of Nightwing's most formidable enemies. Of course, Nightwing has met his defeat at the hands of Slade multiple times, but he has admittedly also been able to defeat Slade, so it's difficult to say who actually comes out on top in terms of power. But if I had to venture a guess, it would be Deathstroke. He has literally defeated a Titan everyone was afraid of, granted with a powered up sword, but it still counts, and he has even given Batman some trouble. We say some trouble, but he has defeated Batman. And if Batman lost this guy, you can only imagine how frightening he really is. Aside from that, if we rank in terms of who gets forgotten the most often, Deathstroke would admittedly be probably not even on this list. That being said, even fans sometimes forget this poor guy exists. As I said, when have you seen him recently? So he kind of falls into the same camp as Martian Manhunter, as somebody that comic book fans are well aware of, but everybody else is just kind of like, oh, is that Deadpool? If you're a fan of all things supernatural and superheroes, we have got to reintroduce you to Dr. Occult. From the creators of Superman and one of the first characters of DC to be in costume, Dr. Occult is a really fun and interesting character. He actually changed from that costume to more normal clothes later on though, but whatever. Not only a detective, but a detective with supernatural abilities, he can use spells, open portals, all that sort of stuff. You need help moving? He can help you out without a sweat with his telekinesis. Oh, also, did you know that he fused with his partner Rose Psychic? Yeah, that's right. For quite some time, Dr. Occult and Rose Psychic shared the same body. So you're kinda getting two characters in one in this entry. Lucky you. If you really think about it, his powers are just like that of a ghost with some added features. We place Dr. Occult here on our list not only for his abilities, or because of how we often tend to forget that he exists, but also because he has literally went against the Spectre. Well, not exactly, but his significance is that he was there in the fight against Asmodel, who had the Spectre's powers at the time. That's pretty cool, isn't it? He's also fought demons, has went to hell just because he could, and beaten up other supernatural beings that you really don't see that often from DC. Really a unique character that just hasn't been given as much love and attention as other people, like perhaps Constantine. So, any Dr. Occult fans out there who are calling for him to get his own movie, I'm right there with you. Just because I would think it would be funny to get somebody that absurdly obscure. Another one of Justice League's former members who is easily forgotten, we have Zauriel. Now, this character was meant to replace Hawkman when Hawkman was rendered unusable with his complicated background, and Zauriel did serve as a replacement for a while, until he became his own bespoke character. We just can't ignore this sea-parting and flame sword-wielding hero. And speaking of his sword, actually, from all of Zauriel's abilities, what makes him the most powerful is his blade, a sword that can cut through anything, even the dimensional fabric itself, but that's not all. It can also erase a person's entire existence. This sword is one of DC's most powerful weapons, and it belongs to this character that has just been archived, shelved, put in the back. But the extent of Zauriel's powers don't stop there, because he has now been upgraded, and he has Archangel Michael's sword, which is way, and I mean way, more powerful than what Zauriel had before. Did you know that Zauriel defeated the Phantom Stranger too? So why? Why has this character with such cool abilities largely been forgotten? Well, if we were to take a guess, he was made to fulfill a role, and when that was done, that was kinda it for him. Maybe we suppose it could also be his lack of popularity? Actually, what about you? What do you think caused Zauriel's disappearance? I'm really not sure, but we just had to give him a place on this list because he really is one of the most forgotten ones. Well, aside from like Dr. Occult and Immortal Man and all the people who came before him, because who really remembers any of them? Alright, number 6, we have Martian Manhunter. What? You scream incredulously. You think any of us have forgotten him? You're out of your mind, I can't believe this. You reach towards your keyboard, ready for war. But wait just a second, hold your horses. Unless you are a lifelong DC fan, did you really remember this guy until now? Let's be honest, most of mainstream audiences have completely forgotten about Martian Manhunter, and even more so, they don't really even remember what he was capable of. So let's start off and list a few. First off, this man can die by fire. Actually, that's like pretty much everybody else in existence. He's easily overpowered the mind of Mr. Okay, let's get ready for this one because I'm gonna do it. Mr. Mizaplictic. Nailed it. Ultraman, who's basically Superman but evil this time. Super Doom, who is exactly what it sounds like. It's Superman and Doomsday combined together. And Batman. Wait, Batman? Just regular, old, normal Batman? I guess there's no need to explain that one any further. Point is, this guy is way too overpowered, just based off the people whose butts he's kicked. Martian has had his good times and his bad times. He's been defeated and has been victorious as well. Admittedly, kind of like every other hero, basically. But sometimes his defeats overshadow all of the cool stuff he's done and is capable of. What really holds Martian back is his fear of fire. But once he overcame that, he could tank a hit from a flamethrower. Doesn't he seem kind of invincible now? Well, no, he can still die, but it does power him up quite a bit. And if that doesn't have you sold on Martian being one of the most underrated and most powerful characters in the DC line, he took on the Justice League all by himself, which, you know, is definitely saying something, considering that the Justice League is probably the most powerful team of heroes in comics, period. It sure would be great to see him in more things, and not just as a cameo at the end of Zack Snyder's Justice League. Immortal Man. He has barely had any appearances on screen, and we believe that he might actually be quite underrated. Other than being able to raise from the grave like a zombie, Immortal Man in the comics has pulled off feats just like any other hero, and most of the time, we tend to really forget about him. He kind of just blends into the background. Honestly, to the point where this poor guy has had to make his own Forgotten Heroes Club. Seems like his foresight works so well that it breaks the fourth wall into our own reality. Immortal Man is usually just a regular guy with regular vulnerabilities that most humans would have. Only, he can resurrect into different people of different names and ages, sometimes with different abilities as well. And with his trusty pendant reminding him of who he really is, he has all of his lives and experience combined into one body, which, within the DC universe and all of their heroes, makes him a little bit less than average. Although in DC's comic universe, most of the times where Immortal Man has tried to save anyone, or even the universe, he used his immortality to do so, giving up his life until eventually he actually died. I mean, couldn't he just call Batman? Isn't that the solution to most things? But yes, literally someone called Immortal Man died. That's a weird sentence, but that is what was implied in Resurrection Man number 27 from 1999. When he went against Warp Child, their Tektites sort of merged or collided, which destroyed both, and since the Tektites were the thing that made Immortal Man, well, immortal, we kind of were left to assume that he may have died for good this time. However, he made his return in the relaunch of DC Comics, but he has basically been rebooted or reworked because this is not the same Immortal Man we always knew, as well, he has siblings now who share the same powers as him. Sounds like I've heard that somewhere before. So assuming that the original Immortal Man is dead, we move over to the Immortal Man of DC Rebirth. Only has been replaced by Caden Park? Seriously? You had one job, Immortal Man, and it was in your name. Yet you leave us again. Just a disappointment. This guy literally eats multiverses for breakfast. A threatening and reality-bending presence, here we have the Anti-Monitor. The limitations of his powers probably begin on how full he gets from eating too much. But that's not all, as he is bested Darkseid. Yeah, that's right. Honestly, we were trying to avoid this because you know how Darkseid's fanbase is. Please send help. But let's answer the question. Why is the Anti-Monitor above Darkseid? With all of DC's varying versions of most, if not all of their characters, it is definitely difficult to say who comes out on top in a power battle between Darkseid and the Anti-Monitor. On one hand, the Anti-Monitor could easily defeat Darkseid in mere seconds, while on the other, Darkseid could wipe the floor with him. It really just kind of depends on the context in which they are fighting. While leaving that aside for now, the Anti-Monitor is another one of DC's most powerful threats. So much so that multiple heroes have tried to take him on, multiple times, but they've pretty much all lost. His kill count is actually pretty high already, but then, number 4? It isn't that the Anti-Monitor is weak, it's more so that he becomes overshadowed by other more well-known characters. In terms of popularity, Darkseid is more well-known than the Anti-Monitor is. For those who are more into DC movies than the comics, he's actually never appeared in any of the DC movies, although he has been in the Arrowverse, so he does get some points there. Although even there, he was probably pretty quickly forgotten. If we were to take a guess, it is probably because he might eat the universe of DC cinema if he were to actually appear. Unless something is in the works regarding him. James Gunn, I'm looking at you. Do you know that there's a large amount of the audience who completely forget that the Watchmen are part of DC? It's true. The last time that we saw this particular character from that legendary comic storyline was way back in 2009, and then in 2019. 2019? Was he actually there? Who's Cal? We only know Dr. Manhattan. Setting aside our confusion about his identity, he hasn't appeared on screen really all that much. Well, that is if he did appear in 2019. I got my eyes on you, Cal. You know what that means though, right? Another really good character clearly just kind of pushed to the side. But hey, good news. There might be something in the works because if we take the hint from Flashpoint Beyond, we might be seeing Dr. Manhattan somewhere in the future. Hopefully, because again, this guy's power levels are simply insane. To such a degree that he literally cannot even stick to just one universe. He has to flaunt those powers everywhere he goes. To add to this hero even more, he is seen as a great threat to even some of the most powerful characters in DC, such as Mr. Missaplictic. Totally nailed it. And he has single-handedly rebooted the DC universe, and took several years off, like 10, but is that really that amazing at this point? Oh, and did we forget to mention that he's immortal? Seems to be a running trend. There's just so much about this character that just makes him absolutely awesome. Literally, his weakness is something that is thought impossible to even exist. A hypothetical particle known as tachyons. Well, somehow in this absurd world of DC, they'll probably find a way to make those not hypothetical somehow. Because we can't just have good things. But you know what's even better than an overpowered supervillain? An overpowered superhero. Just watching a hero absent-mindedly flick his enemies away and without a thought, it's just so much fun to watch. DC, how could you not use this character more? Probably because he is so overpowered. One of DC's most successful TV shows is Lucifer. Lucifer has a presence on screen, so it isn't like he's really all that forgotten by most people. But what may have been forgotten is the Lucifer in the comics and what he is actually capable of. Let us remind you, and we'll start off with a bang by saying that this guy has been able to give the Presence some inconvenience. Okay, the way that I just put it there sounds less cool, but for those of you who aren't aware, the Presence is currently the strongest character in all of DC, aside from Batman, but that's not official. And Lucifer here was able to face off against this unbeatable being. The gall of this guy. But that's not all. Everybody listen up. We have another immortal here. What's that bring our immortal count up to? A lot? Okay, cool. While Lucifer can be damaged, he cannot die. And on top of that, he's just way too powerful. Only his brother and rival Michael can match him. The Source doesn't even affect him. He can teleport, he can open doors to other existences, he can create entirely new worlds. He has speed, and he doesn't need a physical body to exist. Oh, and he can also manipulate minds. How long of a list have we been going? I'm kind of running short on breath here. He is greater than the Angel of Death. In fact, death in general has no power over him. He has destroyed many gods. He has held the world in his hands. The angels are afraid of him. Okay, I think you get the point now. If you don't, we can probably keep going, but what makes Lucifer take this spot on the list is because we just had to include him for all those DC movie fans out there. You're really missing out if you haven't seen this guy in action. Sure, you might have watched the show, but you might have just completely forgotten that that show takes place in the DC universe. Kind of. But those who do already know this guy probably haven't forgotten about him. Be that as it may, we really couldn't help but include him here. Because even if people know that he's a part of DC, there will always be those who don't. Right? Right? Why aren't you agreeing? Wait, why are you leaving? Number 1 is up next. Please just stick around for this one. I swear it's going to be a banger. This isn't just a list of the most powerful characters in DC, but often the ones that you don't really think about. And that's why we picked Plastic Man as the number 1 most powerful DC character that everyone's sort of just forgotten exists. Plastic Man is overwhelmingly underrated. His last appearance that we can recall off the top of our heads is from Batman the Brave and the Bold, an animated series running from 2008 to 2011. He actually also appeared in Justice League Action, Injustice, another animated movie from last year, but then it all just sort of ends there, outside of comic appearances obviously. And usually his roles have just largely been side roles. But we are really underestimating his character.
Cross my heart and hope to...
And his abilities. Let me show you what I mean. Despite his goofy looks and his role as a comic relief character, Plastic Man can literally change his entire molecular structure, meaning he can basically shapeshift into anything. And imagination's the limit. This would allow him to survive deadly blows, heal himself, get into the smallest of spaces, go off against the largest enemies, pull a disguise better than Superman's, and even change the levels of his strength. If he's blown to bits, he can put himself back together again. And if he gets angry, well, really, no one would want to be on his bad side. But this character is the most sidelined of the sidelined. Maybe because his role is just to be sort of the funny guy. But come on, he is much more than that. Of course, like any other hero or villain, he has his weaknesses, and that's extreme heat or liquid nitrogen. But other than that, you can't really hurt him, unless you hurt his feelings maybe. But in the words of Batman himself, if that doesn't give you an idea of the level of power he hides behind that doofy smile of his, you're brain dead. He said it, not me. How would you pick your characters for this list? Or how would you rank the ones that I talked about? I'll leave you for sharpening your keyboards and go hide for some unmentionable amount of time. Until I see you again at some point in the future, have a wonderful day and thanks for watching.